Brad McElwain with the Family Engagement Office, and I want to thank everybody for taking your time this evening and joining us for what I think is going to be a very informative hour for everyone. I'm part of the Office of Family Engagement, and my colleague, Minta McNally, and Anna Marie Carr Reinhardt are two other members that are part of this program, and we've worked closely with the Office of Personal Career Development to bring you a series of 5 programs. We've taken every class, starting with the graduating class last year. Now we're working our way to the sophomore class. We want to bring you this information. Again, I think you're going to really enjoy it. Andy Chan, who's going to kind of lead us here, is 10 years at Wake Forest, 10 plus years, and created the Office of Personal Career Development, and we are incredibly fortunate to have Andy and his staff to be able to kind of lead us and lead our students into the new generation of just what career development looks like. So I want to be able to pass it on to Andy here in just a moment. I want to let everybody know that in the Q&A section, we want you to be able to add any questions that you may have. Nothing is too big or small. We'll try to be able to get to everything through the panelists. We will have this recorded and on our family page in about a week's time after we put everything together with answers to a lot of the Q&A and the recording of the video. So again, Andy Chan, our VP for Innovation and Career Development. Andy, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you, to Minta, to Anne Marie for pulling this opportunity together for us to speak to parents of sophomore students at Wake Forest. We are just really glad to be able to share what information we have about what's going on in the marketplace when it comes to jobs and careers, what we're doing in terms of how we're engaging students on campus, what are different new creative ways that are available to us that we haven't had in the past, and also hear from a couple great students who have had some good interactions with our office and used our resources and services in such a way that they found some benefit that hopefully could be also great stories and benefit for your own students to know about and to be thinking about to make their experience positive too. So I'm going to start with one team member, then go to the next one, and then I'll let Heidi take over and talk to the students, and then we'll wrap it up at the end. But to start with, I want to talk to Stuart Mee. So Stuart is our head of employer relations. So all of the companies and organizations who recruit at Wake Forest, Stuart and his team engage with. He actually has to also handle all of the online communications between the companies and the students. We use a platform called Handshake for that type of information. Then all of the data that we get out of the system, how we analyze it, how we make sense of it, how to figure out what we should be pushing, what should we be telling students and employers. Like, his team manages all those things, as well as in the background thinking about all of our general operations, both in person and virtually with our students. So he has a lot of different responsibilities with a really great team. But the one thing that he does that's very unique is he actually does a video every 2 weeks where he talks about the state of the market. And he's able to actually put that out. And a lot of employers around the country actually listen to this because they're really wondering what is going on with college recruiting. So Stuart, I'd love to start with you. If you could talk a little bit about just the current state of the job market and in particular the internship market. But it'd be great if you give a bigger picture, just, what do you see about the job market and then also the internship market? Because obviously most of the news in the world feels really not so great, but I'm glad to know that actually it's probably better than they think here at Wake Forest.
Yeah, sure. Thanks everyone for joining. Glad to be on. And I will first start off by saying that it's not the end of the world out there for college students. There are jobs and internships if you're willing to go into something that may not be exactly your dream job, or if you're willing to acquire the skills that are in demand. So let's put that kind of rumor to rest that there's nothing for these students. Now, it is going to be a little bit more difficult for the students to go and get these opportunities now because everything is done virtually. It's a little bit harder to stand out, and we're not able to do as many events on campus because employers are not coming to campus right now. But what we're seeing at Wake Forest is, first of all, students are way more engaged compared to other schools that we're seeing. Whether that's Handshake telling us or other email groups that I'm involved in. What I mean by that is students are much more active in terms of appointments with coaches, but specifically when it comes to applications to these jobs, they are really doing a fantastic job. Now, what we're seeing year over year, that if you're looking at all opportunities, jobs and internships, there's about a 7.8% increase in what we're seeing. When you break it down by internships and by full-time jobs, there's about a 33% increase in the number of internships that are posted in our system and about a 2% decrease in the number of full-time jobs. We do a lot of active sourcing for opportunities, and those source jobs are actually being applied to twice as much as some of the others that are in our handshake system. So that's a pretty interesting development, 33% increase year over year in the number of internships. And applications by our students to internships are up almost double at 97%. So the key thing here is to make sure your student is actively applying, because there are opportunities out there right now.
What are particular either industries or job functions where you're seeing an increase of opportunities than we've seen? And then also after that, what might be ones where there may be a more of a decrease?
Yeah. Well, as you can imagine, some of those industries that are not doing so well are tourism, of course. Marketing is not doing so well. Nonprofits are struggling. Oil and gas as well. Those that are doing quite well right now is how we define it through Handshake, kind of multiple levels of banking and finance, the CPG industry, supply chain, logistics, those types of roles. And also internet and software companies are seeing the biggest percentage increase year over year as it relates to internships. Okay. In terms of job functions, sales, software development, doesn't matter the industry or the recession, those two things are still going to be in demand. Billable skill sets, not enough people doing it, and with software development, and then sales, revenue producing abilities. Consulting and finance are still pretty hot, especially as it relates to the mortgage rate near record, maybe record lows. And so there's a lot of opportunities there. And again, marketing is taking a big hit right now, any type of marketing related opportunity. Another thing about location, because a lot of students may or may not want to go a far distance for the summer. They may want to stay kind of at home because of housing and other places or other reasons. But what we're seeing is a substantially higher increase in internship postings in the Northeast and the West. What we believe that may be is because of lack of traffic, lack of having to deal with some of the housing costs in these places, and the benefit over this past summer, because there were a number of people being laid off or furloughed, that employers may be looking to college students as kind of a nice short-term Band-Aid until the economy gets back a little bit to where it was. So that's kind of interesting. And then I've noticed that Mid-Atlantic is opportunities are lagging a little bit compared to South and Midwest and other areas. Also, you see smaller companies are looking for interns as well, again, to probably help with some of the deficits of having to let people go. And then some of your larger, bigger companies are still seeing the intern programs as feeder programs to their full-time. They're staying pretty committed there.
In terms of these internships, a lot of them say they would probably prefer juniors over sophomores. Do you feel like that's the case? And also, do you feel like for sophomores that many of these internships are actually like really potential ones for them? Because, how frustrating will it be to be a sophomore trying to get an internship, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's, no secret that companies are going to prefer juniors over sophomores. That's the natural pecking order because they've had more classes, they've had more experiences, but they can convert them, especially the larger companies, they can convert them to full-time a lot easier than the sophomores. Some companies won't look at sophomores. You think about the accounting sector, they kind of have different programs for sophomores because they don't want to be, quote, used for an internship the sophomore year that can be used as leverage to go somewhere else. The federal government has done that a lot. They'll take on a lot of the freshmen and sophomores, and then they get that experience. Then the Deloittes and the KPMGs of the world come in and get them, swoop in after that. But we do see a lot of sophomores getting internships. I don't want that to discourage people. You definitely want to apply, especially if you have some of those more billable skills that we were talking about. And I think they definitely should apply just as frequently, but don't get discouraged because that doesn't have anything to do with the individual per se. It's just their youth and how many more years they have until they're available to work full time.
In terms of those internships that you've seen, do you have a sense for like how many of them get listed as being like paid internships versus unpaid? Do you have any sense for that, even ballpark?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to differ based off of industries, but most of the companies in our strategic employer service model are paid. Now, some industries like, say, sports, entertainment, fashion, things like that, you may have to put in your time in order to get the experience. But most of the opportunities that we're dealing with are in paid fashion. But in some of the more in-demand fields, you may have to go with an unpaid internship, like I did with in baseball in the Braves organization. When I was between my sophomore and junior year, I had to work an unpaid internship for the local affiliate, and it worked out great. So it's just part of it.
Great. Thank you, Stuart. Thanks for sharing that. I know that's one of the things that we hear a lot about are like unpaid internships, which is not very fun to actually have to have as an option, but it can be a good one to get the experience, especially like you said, it's very much a supply and demand thing. If there's a lot of supply of students
right.
and only a few jobs, and the companies have the leverage there. So I'm glad to hear that you see
exactly right.
companies are wanting to pay their students for doing work. So that's really great. All right, I'm going to move over to Patrick.
Indeed.
Yeah, Patrick does. He's Heidi's right-hand person on helping manage our college career education and coaching team, and works on a lot of special projects with respect to different students and different programs that we run through the OPCD. And Patrick has been at Wake Forest for a long time. He's an alum also, and knows a ton about Wake Forest and knows a ton of people. So it's fun to have you here, Patrick. So first question I want to ask you, Patrick, is when you think about just sophomores securing internships or impact summer experiences, how many % of our sophomores do you think are doing really like productive, helpful things during the summer? What kinds of things are those that you've seen in most years? And also, what do you expect this year? Will it be much different because of the fact that we have a COVID impacted sort of experience?
So, well, as Stuart already suggested, there's some preference on the part of employers to seek juniors for internship programs because those employers can turn those juniors into full-time hires. At least that's their hope before their senior year. As a result, there's somewhat fewer opportunities for sophomores, but there are plenty of sophomores gaining that experience. Most often, we try to get the sophomores to treat that sophomore summer as a building block, as an opportunity to develop those skills. And in addition to doing an internship, we want to encourage them to think about a range of possibilities, to use Andy's term, the high impact experience. In addition to internships, that might also be serving long-term substantive volunteer opportunities, meeting a need in their community, learning about a profession or a field they may be interested in, picking up a class that may be consistent with their longer-term career goals. So, look, while I'm hopeful things get a little better as far as the pandemic goes by the summer, none of us are sure what's going to happen. So from the perspective of a student, what I would be encouraging is for that student to think broadly about the opportunities available to them. Certainly look for internships, look for remote internships where you could perhaps live in one place, home perhaps, or near the campus and work in another place. But also consider those other options, serving, learning, and working, whether that's an internship or some other opportunity that would help develop those skills that will transfer into lots of other settings.
Great, Patrick. So There are certain career paths where having a very sort of specific type of internship maybe matters a bit more than others. I tend to about thinking about sort of the banking finance world. Can you talk a little bit about where you see that being maybe more important, where what you do this summer does make a big difference to what you might do later, as opposed to others where you're developing skills, but maybe are more transferable?
Yeah, certainly. So let me start by responding with the idea that there's simply no bad internship experience, right? Like whatever kind of internship experience your student may have is going to help them develop develop a clearer sense of whether they want to confirm that career as a potential career of interest after they graduate, or quite frankly, reject it. And they're also going to be able to develop relationships that will be an asset to them in the longer run. You're right. There are some industries, some sectors of the workplace where that sort of hiring pipeline is very, very formal. The finance sector, the financial services sector, the management consulting industry. Those parts of the workplace are pretty likely to use their formal internship program as a hiring tool in the hopes that they can convert those students from intern to full-time employee in the future. Now, interestingly, what we've seen in the past few years is those same industries are reaching down a year farther. They might be having that internship program for the person that just finished their junior year, but they are now extending programs to students just finishing their sophomore years. They're having sort of leadership weekends or externship opportunities. One large, well-known consulting firm just reached out to our office to say, hey, look, we have these specialized programs for sophomores, and we're interested in student athletes. We're interested in future leaders. We're interested in students from diverse backgrounds. And we want those people to be sophomores so we can inform them about what our programs look like moving forward for that junior year internship and beyond.
Great. So we got a question in the Q&A about internships in DC, and you know a lot about that because you work there yourself and work with a lot of students interested in those types of careers. Can you talk a little bit about what might be the kinds of things a sophomore might do to put themselves in a position to get some kind of experience this summer in Washington, DC?
Yeah, gladly. That is something. So full disclosure, I interned and then worked in Washington, DC. I had a great experience. I learned a ton while I was living and working in DC. And to borrow a phrase from a parent, a Wake Forest parent that I met with some years ago, for me, that was a platform job. It was a platform to see lots and lots of other opportunities. Sometimes when I talk with Wake Forest students these days interested in working in DC, the instinct is to say, I want to work in a government agency. And there are those opportunities available. We're happy to help students find those opportunities. There's also a broad range of other opportunities. Virtually every elected official, every member of Congress certainly has an internship program. Nearly always those programs are publicized on that elected official's website. There's a brief application. There's often a brief writing sample requested, and those offices have an interest in bringing in folks from their home states or their home districts. So those opportunities are always available, and that's the kind of platform job that I was suggesting. What is a little less obvious, but very, very abundant, are the range of advocacy groups, professional associations, and lobbying firms, all of which hire interns, all of which have shown an interest in hiring Wake Forest students in the past. Wake students have the communication skills, the ability to synthesize information, and the awareness of what's going on in our world to make them very interesting hires. One of the Wake Forest OPCD student assistants this past summer landed an internship in DC, had a great experience, and now she wants to go back. There are all kinds of opportunities in DC beyond the elected official path, and I would welcome the opportunity to talk with your son or daughter about that more in the future.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate your answers to those questions. I want to go over to Heidi now. So Heidi is actually our leader over career education and coaching for the overall OPCD. So every student, first year, sophomore, goes through her team in the beginning, and then a small subset end up going on to the business school. So in total, it's about 5,000 students that Heidi and her team are sort of navigating with and working with, trying to support. And Heidi oversees all of our coaches in this area, but also has developed our courses in this area that actually are 1.5 unit, half semester courses. There are 5 of them, and they are really unique, really powerful. And Heidi, what I have is a few different questions. I can tell by the questions the parents are asking is, how does a student actually engage with the OPCD? When do they engage with a coach? How do they figure out which coach they're with? How are the coaches organized? I think they're trying to figure out, is it by geography? Is it by what I study? Is it by what I'm interested in? Can you give a little bit of the landscape on how to think about that? Because I realize we know that, and some parents do, but a lot of parents don't. Oh, muted too.
Thank you. So I think one of the things, and you're right, it's one of those internal pieces of knowledge that we all think about a lot inside our office, but is really good for parents to know. First, our coaches do have specialties. Brian Mendenhall works with STEM. Shan Woolard specializes in the arts. And all of our coaches have different ways of thinking about how industries may change and differ slightly in nuances and can help in those different ways. And every one of our coaches will see any student. I think one of the big things is to find fit with the coach, is to go ahead and, after they've had an appointment, think, how did that work out? Because of course that's a really big part of any working relationship. So I would say that. And then our coaches actually handle different majors. So when a student logs on to Handshake to make their appointment, they can see the different majors that each coach handles. That said, it is still open to any student choosing any coach where they feel that they have an affinity. Making an appointment is very, very easy, and actually so much more streamlined than even it was a few years ago. A student can log on to Handshake and make their appointment from right there, or they can call the office. But the truth is, the easiest way is to go through Handshake, because you can really see the kind of availability that's there. And I will say our coaches right now, they are opening blocks 2 and 3 weeks out so that students have a lot of availability. And I would say, getting started in our office, one of the myths, I think, is that you have to have everything figured out to go. And actually, I would encourage every parent to go ahead and send their child in, I think of my own children going in. And really, that's what we want to do, is help students figure out what those interests are and kind of where they want to go ahead and start their exploration.
Great. You mentioned Handshake. Again, I think we know what that is. Can you talk about why it's so important to have a profile on Handshake and what that whole system does for us?
Absolutely. So Handshake is a platform with opportunity, and it connects our students to the kinds of things that they are most interested in. Students can sort by job function, by industry, by geography, a host of different things, including Wake Forest sourced opportunities that Stewart's team finds and puts into Handshake just for our students. And so Handshake is not only really important for the student to go ahead and know about, but then they really should know that not only will they shop for opportunity, but employers go in and look for different kinds of students and experiences. So I always tell students that Handshake is a little bit like a two-sided mirror. They are looking for opportunities and employers are looking for talent. So filling out that Handshake profile and becoming really experienced on using it, checking in on it, and they can set up a search so that they can be notified by Handshake when there are things that pop up in their areas of interest.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. That is, again, first and foremost, really important. One of the things that we talked a lot about is for students to be career ready. And we really want them to know themselves, get to know the market, really create their personal brand, be able to network well, interview well, et cetera. One of the things that I know a lot of people like find really hard to do is networking. And maybe what are some things that parents can do to encourage their children if they're talking to them about the idea of networking so that it's not so scary?
Oh, I love that. So we know that about 80% of all opportunities are landed through relationships. And in fact, 44% of those actually are nailed down and delivered through recommendations. 44% is a huge number. So we need our students out there going ahead and developing those relationships. Sophomores sometimes haven't had as much experience with that or exposure to that, or may not know the value of the relationship building process. In fact, sometimes they don't even like the word networking. So what we have really found in the last, we've been using it now for a while, but we've helped students create an ally map. In fact, last week we had parents create an ally map for their children. In other words, the people who could actually share their career story and perhaps some advice. And these didn't have to be necessarily people that were in industries of interest, even for the student, but they were people who could share their network, but also their story, that they had to have some momentum and create that as well. We love teaching students how to use LinkedIn. We have a robust Wake Forest alumni network, and they are fierce. So they want our students connecting with them. In fact, sometimes they come back and they're sad. They say at homecoming, no one's called me. I signed up to be a career connector and no one's called me yet. So what we love doing is teaching students how to go ahead and create that momentum. Once they do it once, they don't stop. They love it. I'll ask Blair about that in just a minute.
Great. All right. My last question for you, Heidi, is we've touched a little bit on like business-oriented careers, a little bit about government. I think sometimes some students are interested in things like STEM, engineering, sort of that group. And then also there's the other side, which might be like the arts and then like social impact, writing, those kinds of careers. So how do students who maybe typically don't think of themselves as like, I'm going to go to the business world per se, can you talk a little bit about how we engage those students, how we help them so that, every student does really matter and that we try to help every student no matter where they're going to go?
Oh my goodness. Yes. I love that. So I'll just speak at a high level, I think first about some of the things that students don't always think about associated with their interest areas. So first I would say with engineering, there are a host of different things. It is a very flexible major in terms of not only finding things that are in engineering when they think about internships, but also we have students who have been very interested as engineering students in consulting or project management. And all of those things are sometimes beyond the vision, the field of vision for that student. And so it's helpful to be able to remind them about that. The arts, there's this whole host of different pieces around the arts. I'm working with an art history major right now who's quite interested in architecture and marketing and finding those niche places where those two come together. And so I would think that not only would that be helpful for her to explore some of those things with me, but her mom is actually also helping her open doors. And then we're finding opportunities with our alumni who are at Sotheby's in different places. The liberal arts majors, our liberal arts majors do go into business. And they go into all sorts of different things. And I, in fact, just connected one, sorry to speak in anecdotes, but I see hundreds of students at a time. So one of our students who was in history went to Goldman. And so it's interesting to sort of help students understand that their major is that flexible tool in their hand, but that they really should be thinking broadly. Our office we have those both anecdotes that sort of encourage and inspire students, but we are also able to find multiple platforms to look for those kinds of jobs, including those in government, in nonprofit, and different places where students may not have looked for the arts, for example.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to you in 1 second. I had one question that just came up. We're sharing a lot of information that I think the parents are valuing. What are ways that we get this information out to the students so that students actually are engaging with us? Can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that we communicate this type of thing with them?
Oh,
or
absolutely.
You could actually ask the students what they hear and what they think. That you could take that over and rather than answer it, like do it with them if you want to.
Oh, I would love that. I would love for our parents to get to meet both Blair and Cameron who are with us tonight. And they have probably seen some of the different communications that are coming out to them. And so I'd love for you both to introduce yourselves, your hometown, the majors you're considering, and then perhaps you can first tackle that communications question. Cameron, you want to take us away?
All right, sure. I'll go first. So my name is Cameron French. I'm a sophomore at Wake Forest University this year. I'm a freshman resident advisor, and I'm looking to major in political science and minor in music, and I'll determine that next semester.
And Cameron, how are you getting information about the OPCD?
So there's a couple of different ways. But first, one thing about Wake is they will definitely email you. It's up to you to read them, but you'll definitely get a lot of emails. And there's always going to be good information in there somewhere. It might take a little bit of scrolling. But you'll see a lot of information about the OPCD and the different things they're offering. And not to say that it's all on you to go and find out about it, but definitely take a little bit of time out of your day to go explore what they have. Because like Heidi said, there are a lot of people that are there to help you, and that's all they want to do. So it's really just you taking the time out of your day and providing yourself with what's going to help you in the future, because they're looking to build your professional skills and everything else. So just taking that time out of your day to go meet them is going to put you so many steps ahead.
I love this. So kind of keeping your eye out for those communications and mining for the things that are most important for you.
Exactly.
Blair, I'm going to kick it over to you. How are you getting your information?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Blair Myers, and I'm also a sophomore at Wake. I'm from Atlanta, and I'm thinking about majoring in English and minoring in psych and art history. And at Wake, I'm involved in Her Campus, which is like a blog website for like college women. And then also I'm a freshman student advisor. And I would say, to answer that question, I know you guys talked a little bit about like the handshake emails. I get emails all the time about like certain internships that like handshake flagged as like things I might be interested in. And so that is super helpful. And then just also like I've made a few appointments at the OPCD this semester and have just been able to talk things through with a coach at the OPCD and like go over my resume and things like that. So really, I think kind of like Cameron was saying, it's super easy to get information and you really don't have to like do a lot. And there are definitely a lot of emails sent to us. So yeah.
Thank you both. Okay, so I'm going to transition and I'm going to ask you, was there ever a time, sometimes we think about the sophomores and sort of where they are, was there ever a time that you were stuck career-wise, and how did you get some momentum?
I guess I can go first. And so I guess, I mean, if we're talking about being stuck, not to say that I'm stuck right now, but I'm still kind of learning about what exactly I want to pursue and what exactly I want to do. And I've had some interactions with Heidi and other people in OPCD, and they've just made sure to like emphasize first your professional skills rather than what it is exactly that you want to do. And those usually, once you start to look more into what it is that you're good at, those things usually start to coincide a little bit more than you would realize. So noticing that you're a good teamwork member, noticing that you're a good communicator, a good leader, or that you're not one. So knowing what you could build on or like what it is that you would be providing to someone else can help you in conversations that you'll have with different people. Like when we had the job fair, we were able to talk to different companies. So knowing what skills you'd bring there was something that you could bring up in the conversation. But then also hearing about what they want is something that you could work on when you left.
I love that. So I also hear that you're having professional informational interviews, informational conversations, and that you went to the career fair as a sophomore.
Yes.
Thank you, Cameron. And Blair, I would say the same thing to you. Has there ever been a spot where you thought, oh gosh, I need to get some momentum, and how did you do it?
I would definitely say I have been in that position, and my parents are actually on this call, and they know that too. But I think what I would say for that is like, what helped me is realizing like any step you take is like movement forward, even if that's working on your resume like a little bit every day, or creating a bio for your handshake profile, creating a LinkedIn, just like doing small things, and that kind of that like is going to move you forward, and even like little steps help you. And then I would say like what also has helped me is realizing that just like it really helps you to get excited about something. And even if you don't know what you want to do exactly and kind of what your future looks like, if you just start, dreaming up things and getting excited and seeing what internships look really fun on Handshake and just sort of like getting excited about it, I think that helps you kind of get out of like the phase of being stuck.
So we have parents on the line, and I appreciate so much the information that you're sharing. If you were going to have parents sort of if you were going to give advice to parents about how they can help their student have momentum or move forward, what might you say?
That's a really good question. I think that college is really like a time of self-discovery. So kind of providing your kid with that space to navigate, because they may say, "Oh, mom, dad, I want to be a doctor." So all you hear is med school, and then when you get their midterm grades back, all their classes are English focused and philosophy, and you're a little confused. But one thing my dad always stressed to me was that your major is more about how you learn, and more about the skills that you want to kind of create. So not necessarily emphasizing what it is that they do, but just emphasizing what it is that they take away from it.
Nice. And Cameron, one thing that I know just from you and I having had connection on campus is you've also found mentors, and that's been an important thing. And I wonder what you would say about that.
That's a good thing too. I have found a lot of people that are just willing to help. That's one thing about Wake as well. Everybody wants to see you leave the campus, and not necessarily like get off, but they want to see you build upon what they've already created. And so in addition to kind of giving them that space, just trusting them when they're saying that they're doing what they're supposed to, and understanding that sometimes it isn't always going to be homework for 5 hours a night. It might just be a lot of small meetings with teachers or going to a coffee shop and building more rapport, and then kind of learning, oh, what they're doing is what I want to do. So now you've had someone that can kind of guide you along your new path that you wouldn't have known about before if you weren't to go to Cranky's or to go to Chick-fil-A, midday.
Yeah, building those relationships. I love it. Thank you. And Blair, I think about you with your parents here on the phone call. If you were speaking to the other parents, what kinds of things would be helpful for a sophomore parent to be able to do to support their child, their student?
I think I would just say to be encouraging and to just kind of ask them like what excites them and, what they're interested in. And also kind of recognizing that like, kind of like Cameron was saying, like, it's definitely a journey and, there's a lot to think about, but it's also like all so exciting. And so I would just say like not to put a lot of pressure on students because I think like we're all still figuring it out, but also it's very exciting. So kind of the encouraging piece, I would say.
Last question. How would either of you feel, and both of you I think have experienced this a little bit, we talked about the ally map for students. What would it be like? Would it be helpful for parents to open their networks for you? What might that be like?
I think that would be helpful. I think that like one thing I've learned at Wake is that any resource is a good resource. It just kind of depending on like what you're trying to take out of it and what you want to take away from it. So just having like a whole another pool of people to speak to, and of course people that you trust, seeing as like they have that kind of common relationship with you. I don't see how that could be anything harmful. I only see positives from that personally.
Thank you, Cameron. And Blair.
I would completely agree with that. I think any like relationships you build with any adult in really any profession is going to be helpful. I actually talked to our family friend who is a journalist in Germany for our education class last week. We had to like do some informational interviews, and she told me just so many cool things. And I think that it's just really interesting to have a wider perspective of all there is out there. And so I definitely think any relationships you make can be helpful. So, yeah.
So grateful to you both for coming. I'm so grateful that you both have been applying for things, going to events, and I really appreciate you sharing your stories here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. Thank you so much for leaning in and doing the work and staying attentive and having a real like growth mindset. Just wanting to continue to learn, grow, sort of keep your options open. You're still a lot to learn and figure out, and not feel like if you don't have it figured out, it's not a bad thing. That's just part of the process. So that's very cool. There were a couple other questions that came up that I wanted to make sure we asked. So I think, Patrick, one of them was a little bit about if you're like a student interested in pre-med or healthcare, and how should you think about how to spend your summers? Do you get an internship? Do you do research? What does an internship look like? What are some of the options that you think are good to consider?
some of the things that a pre-med or pre-health student should be doing now in their sophomore years, if they haven't already, they should reach out to the pre-health committee on campus, led by Drs. John Tomlinson and Carol Gibson, to establish a relationship with those folks that will stay in relationship for the rest of their Wake Forest career. Beyond that, medical schools look for 3 or 4 things. They look for really strong academic performance, so staying strong on that point is going to matter. They look for research when possible, so finding a professor whose research your student is interested in, and your student reaching out to that member of the faculty to express interest in joining their research group makes sense. And then the 2 other things that are often requested by med schools are volunteer experience. Showing that you are committed to serving others has become more and more of a priority for the medical schools. And finally, and not surprisingly, some exposure to the healthcare community. We've all heard the occasional story about the person that was absolutely convinced that they wanted to go to medical school until they saw, somebody's blood being drawn and they concluded it wasn't for them. So where access to healthcare facilities may be a little limited in the short run, I think the 2 things that would be best done in the near future are establish a relationship with the pre-health committee and begin exploring options for research either during the academic year, perhaps associated with the class, or possibly in the summer, possibly funded by the Wake Forest Research Fellowship Program.
Great. To find more information about like the pre-health committee, Wake Forest Research Fellowship Program, is that on our website or is another website that you could easily find that?
So the Office of Academic Advising, the OAA for short, is how your student might refer to that, manages, sort of coordinates the pre-health advising program, and the pre-health advising program has its own website. In a minute, when I'm done speaking, I'll be happy to sort of add that to the Q&A if I can. So that was pre-health, and then the Wake Forest Research Fellowship Program. You can learn more about the Wake Forest Research Fellowship Program through the Dean of the College's website. They run something called the Eureka Center, Ureca, Eureka, and they list a variety of funding opportunities for research. Final note I'll offer for the pre-health, pre-med students is there is a full-on EMT class here on campus. Your student can take a class at Wake with the end result being a certification as an EMT, and there is an EMT team that runs on campus. But they can also take that certification and do that work in other areas.
Great. That's great. Thanks, Patrick. There's a lot of great information and specific resources that are really, really helpful. One of the things actually that I also know comes up quite a bit is the reality of doing internships where there's a high probability that they'll be virtual in some way. I was wondering, Stuart, if you could talk a little bit about any sort of either indicators how companies and employers are thinking about what internships this summer are going to look like, and most likely will it look like what it did this summer, which were maybe mostly virtual, but also more organized than last summer. Last year's summer, it felt like everything was really sort of crazy. So maybe you can talk about that and what it'll be like this summer, or at least what you think it'll be like.
Yeah, so far from the employers we've talked to, I think a lot of them would like to get back to face-to-face, but they're not willing to make that commitment, or it may not even be their decision at this time. So right now, I think, as you were saying, they were kind of caught off guard in April when a lot of this stuff was happening, and they tried to put together the best they could, or they just did away with it because they didn't feel like they could make it work. So it's to be determined. Right now, I think what I'm seeing a little bit in the Northeast and the West, it may turn into maybe a better opportunity for some of these companies and regions where, in some cases, it may be work against them in terms of providing housing for these interns for 2 to 3 months, or some of the other issues. They can cast a much wider net and get access to talent virtually. Now that they've done it for over a year now, they're maybe better able to manage it. A related item that we hear a lot from the previous call of the juniors is what about since the break is going to be from like Thanksgiving to the end of January, are you seeing a lot of winter break internships? And, the market has not said that they're interested in that now. I don't know of any employer that has asked for that. In years past, it's been seasonal around the holiday spending, things of that nature. You also see winter internships in the accounting space, but that's more from like January to around April. But we don't see a lot of employers saying, I want to do a program, in December and January for these students in the same way they do it for summer internships. I don't think that's going to change, but it's hard to say at this point, but time's running out if it does.
Yep, that makes sense. And speaking of that, maybe Heidi, in terms of thinking about how to use this period from, when finals end in December through the end of January, when you come back to school, what kinds of things do you think might be productive ways for sophomores to be thinking about? How might I use that time?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that question because I was sitting here just twitching. Yes, I want them to be gaining skills and experiences. I just popped into the chat Parker Dewey, which is a place where students can get micro internships online, and some of them are paid. One of my students just landed one this week. She's thrilled, and she is a liberal arts kiddo and has been hired for an analytics role. And what the employer said was, you are very smart. I feel like you can figure this out. There are probably some online courses you can take, and then you'll roll. And if it works out on this project, I'll hire you for the rest of the year. So Parker Dewey is a great resource. So that's one. Two, finding those allies who are perhaps within your community. They might be within your family. They might be within some of your network, one of your allies, and asking not for an internship, but for some projects that could be done over that break. Why? Again, we're going for skills and experiences, and we'll tell that story in January on that resume. So we have to avoid using the dreaded I word, because to Stuart's point, there may not be any listed internships, but by George, there are a lot of people who could use some extra hands. And Wake Forest students, there's no one better to do that. And then finally, service. Going to nonprofits. Nonprofits always need extra hands, and they have different needs and projects that they can't get to, but would be fabulous for a Wake Forest student to do. And again, whether paid or unpaid, that is still professional experience. And we're trying to lay this foundation and put experience upon experience so that we are building momentum toward the next opportunity that sparks energy in your student. So I would say that is a bonus, in my opinion. And I want our students going out and finding those things, including certifications on LinkedIn Learning. If there are so many different certifications. Again, one of my students just completed a digital marketing certification, which now shows up on her LinkedIn profile, and we popped it on her resume. So there are a host of different things, and just chipping away. Nobody has to do them all at once, but just chipping away at those things and making a plan for how they'll optimize that time.
LinkedIn Learning is one of those resources that many students don't realize it actually sort of is free, given the fact that you're at Wake Forest. It's actually part of all of the fees and tuition that you're purchasing is the ability to get access to that. So I think taking advantage of that while you can, because actually once you've graduated, you actually have to pay for that. So you might as well do it while you're here. And if you have time when you're like not actually in classes, you can try that. Actually, Blair or Cameron, have either one of you done any of those LinkedIn Learning courses, and what do you think about them?
I actually did a LinkedIn Learning course for our education class, and I did one on public speaking. And I really liked it. It was like very short, and there's so many options on there. I was looking through and like thinking about all the other ones I wanted to do. So I think it's an awesome resource that I really did not even know about before kind of like looking into it.
It's now a mandatory part of our college to career courses. Blair, I'm so glad you did public speaking. That was a good one.
Yeah, I can't tell whether actually you were this good a public speaker before the course or after, but you're actually a good example. You could tell people that's what made the difference, because you're a very good public speaker. So thank you. How about you, Cameron? Have you done anything like that?
Personally, I haven't actually taken a part in the course. I don't think it was a requirement before. But of course, now that I know, of course, I'll make sure to take advantage of it.
There you go. There you go. We're going to hold you accountable. And you're going to tell us about it next time. All right. Really, really good. Well, one of the things that I do think I wonder about, I'd be really curious for each of you, maybe we'll just go around the horn and I'll call on each one of you is, if you were thinking about the kind of advice you would be giving to a sophomore student, whether it be, let's say the sophomore student was your own child, or whether it was actually, one of your best friends, what's the kind of advice that you might give them that'll help them get moving in the process? Because I do think sometimes, as Heidi has said, sometimes sophomore year can be sort of a slump year where it feels like, oh, this is my sort of bye year. Freshman year was all exciting. First year, like I'm just sort of frantic. And then I haven't really picked my major, and I'm not yet really having to get an internship because it's hard to get one. So I'm sort of in this year where maybe I get a little bit of a bye. And I was curious, like, what would you say if it were either your friend or your child to say, hey, here's how you should get going, whether it be a motivator or something that makes them think, I should do something about this. So I'm going to go around the horn, ask each one of you. So I'll start with Patrick. What would you say?
Speaking from personal experience, making the decision, from personal experience, quite frankly, walking through the front door of the career office can be a little scary. I was a little uncomfortable with doing that because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so I was not quick to get in the front door of what was then called the Career Services Office. And I think I would want your student to know that they do not have to know what they want to do with themselves when they grow up to come visit us. They don't have to have their major declared. They don't have to have a polished, fine-tuned resume. If they just want to come by and learn a little bit more about how this all works, that's great. Candidly, I have had more than one discussion, really many discussions that start with a student saying, well, my mom said I had to come by, so here I am, what do I do now? That is A-okay with me and with the rest of the team. Send them on. Just getting started is the advice I'd like to offer.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. How about you, Blair? What would you say?
I think I would definitely agree with the just getting started piece. That's really helped me just making little steps and kind of doing my best and just exploring all that there is. And I've done a lot of OPCD, like Zoom meetings, and it's all been really helpful. So I think just start somewhere, and everybody starts somewhere, and everyone starts with a resume that might not look how it will, by the time I'm a senior, but just being confident in what you have on there and being excited about all the possibilities out there and being a Wake Forest student and all that kind of that gets you. So, yeah.
Very good. All right. Thanks, Blair. How about you, Cameron?
For me, I definitely agree with the just getting started, but I'll add on to it. I think a part of the just getting started is just taking advantage of everything that's offered and just kind of having conversations with the people. Recently, I've been interested in the Wake Hollywood program, and I may not have to enroll in the program, but I can at least talk to the person who's over it and just learn more about it. Facilitating those conversations and seeing what it is that you can get into on campus is something that I would.
That's great. Thanks, Cameron. Sure, we got an extra question wedged in there. Actually, it looked like someone might have answered it, so never mind. It was going to be something else to say. But let's stay on the question that I'm asking you. What would be the advice you'd give to your child so as a sophomore to sort of get involved in the process or to be thinking about it?
I think you got to apply. That's first and foremost. A lot of people are scared to apply. And then depending on the type of field that you want to get into, informational interviewing and building a network is highly important. And as Heidi talked about the ally map, all it takes is one informational interview to kind of get you going. Some of my own experience in the sports business, it took one connection that opened up a pyramid of opportunities over 10, 15 years before I was in this business. So apply and network with your everyone your parents, your friends' parents, your parents' friends, you name it.
Yeah, one of the things that you've brought to really sharpen for us is this whole idea that there's a true funnel for getting a job, of which it almost looks on average something like this. 50 applications might get you to, if you're fortunate, you might get to 10 interviews, which you might then get to like 2 job offers. And so you'd rather have 2 than 1, because then you get to choose and also you get to compare. But you have to think about the 50. And for some students, you'll get lucky and it might be as low as 10. And others, it might be as high as 150. And it might seem like, how could I apply to that many things? Obviously, if it's just scattershot, it doesn't make any sense. But if you're actually being thoughtful and you realize, actually, given the online process, it's actually not that hard. It's a lot easier to apply to 50 things using Handshake than it was to apply to 50 colleges. Plus, they're not charging you 50 or 75 bucks a shot to apply. So it's not anywhere near as expensive. But I do think that it's that kind of thing. Like, people are thinking, if I apply to that many, I won't be able to like take all the interviews. The reality is you're not going to get that many interviews. And if you are, good for you. You can say, no, I can't do it. But as we say, it's better to say no to them than to have them say no to you, or not even put your hat in the ring. Like, if you don't play the game, you'll never actually, if you don't actually enter to play the game, you'll never play the game. So I think that's something that you really, and we've seen students really step up. They've really started to apply a lot more to things, but we have to make sure they're ready too. We don't apply with a bad resume or inappropriate resume or things that don't fit them. So we want to help them with that too. So that's great. Thank you, Stuart, for your thoughts. All right, Heidi, you've been chomping at the bit. I know you're ready to go.
Oh my goodness. Well, I was going to say networking because, Stuart, I believe in the allies. So I was going that direction, but now I'm actually I'm going to build off of that, and something that Cameron said too. There are internships on our campus. There are internships at Winston Starts, and our first years and our sophomores get them. There are some in Campus Rec. And you might think to yourself, gosh, why would I want to do social media for Campus Rec? Well, one of the last people who was head of social media for Campus Rec, she's with that little company called Michael Kors, running their social media. So I would say, don't discount some of the opportunities that we have right there. So you can go ahead and pursue those as well. So I guess I would say opportunity is everywhere, and you've got nothing to lose by applying.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Well, everyone, you guys were great at providing all these answers. I'm really glad to be able to share the stage with you and all the great advice and your experiences to help the parents out there not to be anxious and not to be worried, like just to help their student sort of move along and have a lot of confidence that the student can and will do the right thing. Being a Wake Forest student, as I wrote in one of the answers, it's like, our Wake Forest students are great communicators, hard workers, really great thinkers. Like, the reality is that they have all the core material, the professionalism that actually students need, that students have, that employers want. So you don't have to worry about that. And at the end of the day, it's actually, how do you talk about yourself and position yourself to get in there? And a lot of times you need to talk to someone who's not just your friends, but talk to people like our coaches. And so that is why being able to take that step into our office can help you really think about, how do I talk about this in the right kind of way? And things start to really roll. So I just want to say that's really the number one step that has to happen. And that if they need other extra skills, we can help point them to what those specific skills that need to happen, given what their interests are. Because it's not like everyone needs to be a programmer, or every single person needs to be a data analyst, but we can help them find the way. But just let us sort of allow us to help them. That's what we're looking to do. So again, those courses are a great way to get started and really get you motivated. And thank you again for taking the time to spend with us today. We hope this was really helpful. I'm going to pass it back over to Brad.
Andy, thank you so much. I think you can all see why we're so proud of Wake Forest, of what OPCD has become, one of the leading career service offices in the country. At any point in the 4 years, I think it's encouraging your students to take advantage of what Wake Forest has on campus, to be able to get involved, to answer questions, to find mentors, and the process gets started. Encourage them. I think you've heard from the students that they really kind of appreciate the parent support and want to be able to encourage them to kind of find those answers on their own. So I want to thank Andy and his staff, Heidi, Patrick, and Stuart, and especially thank our students, Blair and Cameron, and as Minta McNally, myself, and Anna Marie Parr Reinhardt. We thank you for being part of it tonight. We thank our OPCD office for what they do, and we'll see you very soon. Bye now.